Hi, and welcome to the first session of Baking Made Easy, sponsored by Dove's Farm. And my name's Xanthe Clay. I'm a chef and a food writer for the Telegraph, and I'm your presenter here today. And in this next 45-minute cake decorating masterclass, can't get my words out today, I'll be joined by the top cake maker, Lily Vanilli, known as the Queen of Baked Goods. And she's going to help us all brush up on our cake decorating techniques to achieve our dream cake aesthetic. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to Lily to get started.
Hi, hello everybody.
Hi, Lily.
Welcome to the bakery. Good to see you, Xanthe. So I just want to run through quickly what I'm going to do today. This is a guide on how to perfectly shape your cake, how to stack, fill, and give it a crumb coat. And then we're going to do a really smooth finish coat of icing with Swiss meringue buttercream. And I'm just going to run through some really versatile, helpful decorating tips. Depending on how much time we have, I'd love to show you a caramel drip, an introduction to piping, and a glitter cherry, working with fruit and flowers. So lots of little things that are really versatile and easy. But I want to make this a really useful guide for you. I mean, I'm a self-taught baker, and I watched hundreds of YouTubes when I was trying to figure out how to do this. And it's not super helpful just to watch somebody who's really good at it do it really quickly. So I want to really break it down, go into a lot of detail on how you use your tools, and try and give you a really helpful guide that you can revisit. So there's a lot to get through, and I'm going to just get cracking, if that's okay with everyone. So as you can see, I'm starting out with my cooled, finished baked cakes, and they're really level. The way that I get a level cake is really simple. This is a fail-safe tip. As soon as they come out of the oven, when they're still warm, I just squash the dome flat, really gently. Don't put loads of pressure on it so that you ruin the structure or make it too dense, but just gently flatten that dome. It works perfectly. You make beautiful cakes every time. I just use a slightly smaller cake tin, or you can use a tea towel, anything that's going to make sure you protect your hands and do it straight when it comes to the oven. This is a great way of doing things because you don't waste any cake, you don't mess with the structure of the cake, so you don't weaken it, and you don't just make a big crummy mess anywhere. So that's my top tip on how to start. So we've got our perfectly level sponges here. So I'm going to put to one side. And I just want to show you as our first tool how to load and use a piping bag. So I've been teaching a lot of cake classes lately, and I see people really struggle with this. And I just love to give you some pointers so that you find it comfortable, because actually maneuvering and navigating and using a piping bag properly is just going to make your life much easier when you're decorating. There are lots of different ways you can get your icing onto your cake, but I recommend for beginners, piping bag is the best way, just because you want to start with a thick, even coat and just be removing that as the process to get it smooth. So here's how you load one up. If you start with your piping bag, this way up. Now we're going to be filling with icing, which isn't super runny. If you were filling with something runny, you'd probably keep this end on, but we can snip it off straight away. And I'm going to say make quite a big hole, so between an inch and an inch and a half. If you make a tiny hole, it's going to make your life a little bit harder. You just want to be getting a thick layer of icing out. So, snip off the end. Now start with your piping bag this way up and make your hand into a cup, kind of like your holy can beer. And then over your cup hand, fold the side of your piping bag down. So you kind of make a sleeve. And pull that right down. So at this point, it's not such a big thing, but once you're refilling into this bag, and these are biodegradable, recyclable bags, but if you're going to reuse them, this is going to get really messy with icing. It's become more of a problem. Always follow this method. Fold that down and just make a little hole, which we're going to fill into here. Now, I am stacking my cake with an American-style buttercream. The recipe's on my website. I make it with butter, icing, sugar, and double cream. This is just how I like to do it because I think it tastes good. And then I do Swiss meringue buttercream on the outside. But if you don't want to faff around and make lots of different icings, you can just use the Swiss meringue. So as you can see, I can use this hand to guide it a little bit, but I'm filling into this hole with my hand. So that's ready to go. Now pull the sides of your piping bag up straight and all your icing safely in there, really nice and clean. So the next thing you do to view the piping bag properly. Essentially, all of the steps we're going to take now are to make sure the icing comes at this end and not this end, and that you have a really nice control over your bag. So you're going to make sure you squeeze your icing right to the end, and there's all of the pressure is down this end of the bag. So push to the end, and then at the back of that, just have to give it a few good twists and really twist it so it's completely sealed. So I'm just checking everyone can hear me okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Is there an issue? Okay. So we want to twist this a few times. Okay, great. And then when you make sure that's completely sealed, if you essentially want to grip it between your thumb and forefinger. Now find a way that's comfortable for you. I tend to put mine all the way down like this, so it's clasped like that. You really want to ensure that that's held, sealed, and shut. Just practice that before you get started on your cake. And then let the bag fall into the palm of your hand. And now this should be very easy. You're doing this dual action of holding it close and then squeezing. And you should be able to squeeze very, very gently, and the icing will come out. If you feel like you have to put a lot of pressure on the bag, your hand is shaking at all, just practice, stop what you're doing, readjust, and make sure you get it right. So it should be a tiny bit of pressure. That's just going to make life a lot easier with whatever you're doing.
Hi, Lily.
Hi.
Hi.
Everything okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Penny just asking if you can just remind us how you got the cake flat.
Oh, yes. So as soon as it comes out of the oven, just gently press it flat. Just use a smaller cake tin or a tea towel. Just show it what to do, basically. You're the boss. And don't forget that you can also watch this back. So this is a resource you can save and then come back to next time you're decorating a cake. So everything can be on repeat. So I've got my cake board here. Just ignore those crumbs. And I always pipe a little dab into the center of the board just to stick the cake in place. So just with a really gentle squeeze, holding the bag shut, a little bit of icing. Now I always stack my cake with the square end down. So that goes there, make sure it's in the middle of the board. And then with your piping bag, again, twist, seal, and just gently squeeze. We are going to pipe in a circle around the outside. And then pipe a little, notice how I readjust the bag so that the pressure's always at the base. So you just give it another twist. And then a little bit more into the middle. Now I'm going to fit into this in a second, but first I want to smooth it out. And I just want to introduce you to the next tool I'm going to give you some instructions on today. And that is this offset spatula palette knife. So just a few notes on how to handle this. Because I think how you hold it and the amount of control that you have with it will really affect your results. So I just want to show you, I hold it more or less as you would hold a knife. Some people on my team hold it with their finger to guide it. Whichever way is most comfortable for you, you want to make sure you have a really firm grip and have control. And always clasp it just right towards the join. So that's going to give you the most amount of control. Now this should be really, really comfortably a firm grip in your hand. So every time you're pressing against the icing is doing exactly what you want it to do. If you find you're kind of pressing against the icing and it's pushing back, don't let it be the boss of you. You need to get in control of the palette knife. So just again, with this, practice. We're gripping it firmly, as you would a knife, more or less. So you've got a comfortable control towards the join. And the part of the palette knife you always want to be using is the bottom flat part. So that's what we're using. We're using it more or less horizontal. So just smoothing out the middle of the icing, which we piped onto the cake. If you can, leave this rim around the outside because that's going to be our kind of wall to keep the filling in. And if you can see the motion is kind of like spreading butter on toast, but just back and forth. So you're always using that flat underside, just slightly an angle. So push the icing around so it's more or less even, and that's it. If you need to, you can come back and just pipe your little wall at the end. But we want to have a slightly raised edge, which we'll put filling into. So I'm going to use salt caramel for my filling. squeezy bottle. You can put anything in here you like or nothing at all. So fresh fruit is great, chocolate chips, whatever you want. I always put a bit of extra mold in it if I'm using salt caramel to keep it salty. So the next layer of cake, again, I want the square edge to be outside. So that should be facing upwards. And then pop that on top. Just this whole stage is all about giving yourself a great structure for your finished cake. So this is the point where you can readjust your cake, make sure it's in the center. This is the point where you have the most control. So just use this step to make sure everything's nice and even. So this is also called a crumb coat. And essentially, whilst giving ourselves a lovely shape, we just want to catch all those errant crumbs so they don't come back to bother us later on. So back to the cake with the icing. And this is where you're going to start using the turntable. And that's the other thing I really want to give you some pointers on today, because this is your best friend when you're icing a cake. You can ice a cake without one, but not really in the way that we're doing today. So just want to give you some tips on how to do it. And it's a really great thing just to practice doing something with your right hand or your decorating hand, whether that's right or left, and using the turntable at the same time, because to get consistency in your results and to get nice, even, whether it be piping or finish on your cake, you make life much easier for yourself if you're working into one spot and then moving the turntable so that spot is always where you're working into. So you're essentially doing very even coating in one place, even activity in one place. So just practice that, doing something with your piping hand and turning the turntable at the same time. That's going to be the skill to lock in. So with my piping bag, twist the end, keep it sealed shut, cupped in my hand, so it's really easy to squeeze. I'm going to pipe onto the cake. So for everything I'm showing you today, when you do it at home, I always want you to work to the point which is the most easy access and where you can see. And if you can, get down to eye level. So I'm going to be showing you some things around here so that you can see what I'm doing. But just remember, when you're doing it, always somewhere that's really comfortable for you to access and comfortable for you to see. It's amazing how much people kind of end up doing things right here, but just make life easy for yourself. So I'm going to pipe, always start with the top. Icing, just a nice even layer, which you're going to smooth out. And then I always pipe into the vulnerable areas first. So you should be around here, but I'm just going to do it here so you can see. So I will pipe over, gap in the middle, and then also over the corner. And it's just those vulnerable spots. If you cover them with icing, it just makes it a little bit safer when you come to using your palette knife. So just wondering if I've missed any pointers. So at this stage, you always want to have a little bit more icing than you need, because essentially the process is a bit like plastering. You want to be putting loads on, and then it's the process of taking it off which allows you to smooth it out. So you put too much on, take it off. It is always easier to take away than it is to add. So just more than you need. Nice thick layer, make life easy for yourself. So again, with the palette knife, firm grip towards the join. So you've got really comfortable control. We're smoothing out the top so that it sort of falls over the edges. And a nifty trick that you can do with the palette knife is just to slightly angle it. Try and show you what I'm doing. So this sort of angle, just slightly raised so the back side is touching the icing. About 1 centimeter in from the side. Hold it in one place, steady. And then now you want to have your arm locked, elbow locked, wrist locked, and your palette knife in one spot. Just turn the turntable, and that's going to give you a really flat, smooth top. Take that away. And then for our sides, so I would want you to be working to this spot right in front of you, but I'm going to come and show you over here. But essentially, when you go to do the sides, it's the same action. So if you notice here, I'm using the bottom of my palette knife. When it goes to the side, you want your elbow up in the air, and it's more or less the same body position. And then we're going to work to smooth the icing. So I'm going to show you around here what we need to do. So now you're just gently pushing the icing back and forth so that you give yourself a nice even coat. Don't worry about it being smooth. Don't worry if some gets on the board. we've got lots of steps to go to clean that up. So just back and forth with your smoothing motion and using the bottom side of your palette knife. That's it. And you can see that I've ended up with a lip which overhangs the top of the cake, which is what you want. If it doesn't happen naturally as you go, you can just go and pop some extra icing in. You want to have that lip because that's how we're going to get a smooth edge later on. So next tool.
Lily, I'm trying to.
Hey. Fabulous. How's it going?
I'm a bit behind, but you know, I'm getting there.
Okay. Well, remember what I said about working to the front?
Yeah.
Watch this back on repeat, you know. Everybody, I want to see you just on one side and then turn the turntable. So work to the same spot where you can see elbow in the air, like Xanthe, fabulous. And then just turn the turntable. So that's a good question about the icing. I will come back to that. So next tool I want to introduce, in fact, I'll answer that now because it's relevant. So with your icings, always give them a beat just before you use them. And it is something which will fluctuate depending on the weather. So today is really, really soft. But as it gets colder, that's something you almost constantly have to keep an eye on. So even if it's freshly made icing, if it's been sitting out, it's something which there is a kind of a time limit on. It means you have to work quite quickly when you're on the cake. But the last thing I do before I use icing is just give it a bit of a beat. So it's all softened up, there's no crusting happening, and you've got a really nice smooth consistency. So I will come back to that when we do Swiss meringue. So next tool that I want to introduce you to is this really unattractively named cake scraper. If anybody knows a better name for it, please let me know. But for now, we're calling it scraper. And this is a really simple piece of plastic, but it's your best friend when it comes to icing a cake. So I'm going to show you how to use it.
Oh, we've just got a question here. It says like the quality and the weight of the turntable. Is that very important?
Yeah, good turntable. These ones are about 40 quid on Amazon, and all the recipes for icing and my cakes are on the website. So I recommend this one. I can't remember what brand it is, but it looks just like this if you type in cake turntable. I think it's about £40. It's on the cheaper side and it's my favorite. So
like that.
If anyone wants to DM me, I can find the link for that. So this is your cake scraper. Yeah.
The dough scraper. Is that going to be
I think that's perfect. Yeah, that should do it. So we're working with this edge, the straight edge. And I just want to show you the best way to, my hand looks dirty, but it's food coloring, sorry. I just want to show you the best way to hold this. So this is really key. You need to, again, have good control over this tool. And the way that I hold it is with my thumb on one side and then 4 fingers spread pretty much over the surface area that you need to use. So you've got an even grip and even pressure. And you want to get used to holding this straight and just really firm, which can be a bit of a knack because sometimes the pressure you need to apply to the cake is really, really quite gentle. You always need a firm grip on this. So just practice that, spread your fingers, get a nice even grip so that it feels comfortable. And the technique that we're going to use, using the turntable with one hand, scraper with the other hand, is to, I'm going to come around and show you exactly where I'm placing it in a second, but is to essentially smooth the icing off the top layer. We're not scraping it off. The scraping should not be at a right angle. It's more like a smoothing action. So you'll kind of imagine you're skimming the top surface. And you find your position, which I'll come around and show you. I just want to show you the motion first. So you find your position, and you can lie the base of the scraper flat against your board. And then once you've got your position, you keep your arm and your elbow and your wrist pretty locked. You pull the turntable. And this is where you really need to have confidence and hold this scraper really straight and steady, because the icing will vary in thickness. So you might, if anyone's tried making icing cakes before, you might find that you end up with a sort of dome shape, that the icing comes out really uneven. This would be because you're letting the icing push back against your scraper and it's telling you what to do. You need to keep it really straight, locked, and in one position, and then pull the turntable against it. And I'm going to come around and show you the angle.
got a great question here. Someone asking why their buttercream is a bit gritty sometimes.
It would depend on your recipe potentially, or the icing sugar that you're using. You might need a bit more liquid. The recipe on my website has lots of kind of troubleshooting and tips for all the kind of different variables, so you can like go beyond the recipe and adapt as you need to, because obviously ingredients vary. But I would imagine, yeah, it's a little bit too much sugar.
And do you put your cakes in the fridge? This is Sarah asking this. Do you put your cakes in the fridge to kind of firm them up, keep them solid before you put icing on?
So not for this crumb coat, but in between the crumb coat and the final coat, we pop it in the fridge. So I made one earlier, which is setting in there. And that is quite a key step, but it doesn't need to be for long, just kind of 15 minutes, just to firm it up.
Anne is asking if the icing seems a bit thicker at the uneven thickness, top to bottom, looks a bit thicker on the bottom.
You're talking about my cake?
I think so. That's rubbish.
Well, as I say, it may well be, I don't know if you're talking about my cake, I haven't finished mine, but if that's happening, it might be because your scraper is not held straight enough and firm enough, so it's just the icing will be pushing it out. So I'm gonna show. Oh, my cake isn't finished yet. Give me a minute. I'm trying to show you. Okay, so we've still got our lip overhanging the top. Now, as I say, I want you to always be working over here where you can see, but I'm going to show you around the front. So the angle is kind of like this against your cake, so not at a right angle and not like flat, so you're smothering it, but just using almost just this corner of this tiny little edge and brushing it over the surface of the cake. So lock that in position and then turn the turntable against it. And that should give you a really smooth finish. So this is our crumb coat, and we're not too fussed about air bubbles. It doesn't need to be perfect, but this is our opportunity to build a really straight, solid foundation for our cake. So just be more preoccupied with it being nice and neat and straight. Always, you'll notice that I'm always cleaning these tools, and they kind of help each other. So you can use your scraper to catch the icing from your palette knife and vice versa. But you really just want to get obsessed with keeping them clean. It's going to make things way less stressful in your kitchen, and it's basically a necessity. So now we have our smooth edges, and then we've got this rough lip overhanging the top. So we're going on to the next step, which is just giving us a nice flat top. So you would be working to the front of the cake, and I really recommend getting right down to eye level. I work with people who've been doing this for 10 years, and we all get down to eye level. So it definitely is something which makes a big difference. If you're up here, you're just not going to have the same amount of control. So just get down and have a look at what you're doing. And the technique here, let's get my bowl ready, is to just push back in a straight line, and you've got your palette knife angled, kind of like this. So I'm going to show you around the front in a second. You basically push back, cutting away the top to the middle, and take some icing with you. Never go all the way to the other end, and resist the temptation to just go around the side. Always just push back the straight line from the top, and then turn your cake, clean your palette knife, turn your cake, and do it again, so it levels up with the bit you just took away.
Lily, we've just got a great question from Rosemary about how it is you don't get, it's actually from Julie, how you don't get crumbs in it. Why is it not full of crumbs? And I have to say,
oh, well, you know what? It kind of is. Like, this is the crumb coat. Maybe you can't see, but the whole point of this layer is to catch the crumbs. So if you see crumbs in this, that's what you want, basically. That's all good. So I just want to show you now what I've been doing around the other side. So if you can see, just cut back in a straight line to the middle and pull the icing away. Always clean this before you go back to the cake. If you've got icing on there, you're just going to put it onto your edge and ruin what you're doing. You'll have to start again. So unfortunately, there's not really a way you can skip this step or speed it up. You just have to be patient and go around bit by bit and do it so you can see. And that's going to give you a really straight, flat flat top for your cake. Like I say, you should be over here doing it like this, where you can see it easily, control what you're doing. All right, so again, now we've got a nice smooth edge. We can use the palette knife, this sort of angle again, just off, slightly an angle to the cake. Pick a spot, always about 1 centimetre in. If you go too close to the edge, you're going to push icing over the edge. But from about 1 centimetre in, find a spot you like, comfortable, keep your arm locked, turn the turntable, and that's just going to give you a nice smooth flat top. And then just kind of fuss over it until you're happy. Another thing you can do with this handy palette knife is use it just to clean up any mess on the board. So just literally hold it at an angle, turn the turntable, and catch all of those scraps of icing. All right, that's it. That is a crumb coat. So I have one which I crumbed earlier, and I'm going to get that from the fridge, and then we're going to do our final coat with Swiss meringue buttercream. The recipe for that is on my website, and there's also an IGTV video where I just do loads of troubleshooting, and it really demystifies it, and it's really, actually really simple and really quick if you know how to do it. Let's go in the fridge. Okay, so as somebody mentioned earlier, the consistency of our icing is really important. Probably the toppest tip I can give you about Swiss meringue buttercream once it's made is that you always, no matter who you are, always beat it gently on the slowest speed, or even just by hand, just before using it. If it's quite set, you need to put it on high to bring it all together, but then always go down to the lowest speed, and that's just going to get it really smooth and knock out any air bubbles. So I'm just going to go and do that. Go on.
Just got a quick question here. Is there anything you can do with all the bits of icing that you scraped off?
Yeah, I would reuse them. I would reuse those for another cake. You can
for another crumb layer. Yeah,
or cupcakes, or you can use that as an icing for a finished cake. So definitely don't bin it. And as I say, I do 2 different types of icing just because that's the way I do it, because I think it gives the best combination of flavor and texture, but you can use the same icing.
So what's the icing that you'd use for the crumb layer?
So this is more of like an American style buttercream, so butter, ice with sugar and double cream. And then Swiss meringue is cooked egg white and caster sugar, and then that's beaten into a meringue, and then unsalted butter is added, and that just gives you a really smooth finish. I'm just going to get that going.
Oh, yeah, got to get the beater going. So on mine. How are you all doing out there? Anyone else attempting to actually do this live apart from me?
Good question. Oh, here we go. Right, well, I've just got my icing beating, so now's a really good time if anyone has any questions. Got a couple of minutes.
Oh no, Pauline's watching Lily. Yeah, I'm feeling, thanks Penny, I am feeling pretty humiliated here, but I am learning stuff. I'm learning loads of good stuff, and I feel I'm getting better.
There's a pop quiz at the end, you know. So just getting ready, I'm going to prepare my piping bag same way as before. Snip quite a big hole. And again, we're going to start by putting on quite a thick layer of icing. And the way that we get a smooth finish is by taking it off in the right way. So tools really, really nice and clean for sure for this step. So I use PME baking tins, and I definitely recommend them. They last forever. They're not kind of loose bottomed. They give you a really straight edge, and nice.
Are they aluminium? They look like those lovely shiny aluminium.
Yeah.
Amazing. Really good.
Thousands.
Brilliant. So Julie says, I'd be really interested in the quantities that you have to make that lovely big cake, because it's like my cake's probably. What do you
about that cake? I think fab. Quantities. Well, the recipe's on my website. Please feel free. So there's a gluten-free chocolate cake recipe on there.
Fantastic.
The cake keeps for about a week. It's a great cake. So I'm going to crack on because I know there's loads of stuff to get through, but please feel free to fire questions at me if that's helpful. So we're loading our piping bag again, same technique, cupped hands, pull down a sleeve. My spoon, and then filling into the hole. Now I've just beaten this Swiss meringue buttercream on low, so hopefully it's really nice and smooth. And again, just give yourself more than you need to cover the cake. Quite a thick layer. Pull the bag up straight. Squeeze down to the bottom so all the pressure is here, always keeping this sealed. And then twist that just quite a few times, 3 or 4 times, definitely all in. Cup it between thumb and forefinger and squeeze from your palm. Again, starting with the top, all the way around, just covering up the vulnerable edge, which is really just the corner in this case. And the middle, so like quite a big hole and quite a thick layer of icing coming out. And here you can really use your turntable. So you're piping into one place, squeezing gently and just turning the turntable. Readjust as you need to and just gradually work your way down the cake. So essentially everything we do in the Swiss meringue buttercream step is almost all about getting rid of air pockets. So you can just make this stage slightly easier for yourself by reducing the chance of them at this stage. So try to avoid leaving big gaping holes, just cover yourself up basically. And I don't know if I mentioned earlier, there's lots of different ways you can get icing onto your cake, but I really think for a beginner, piping bag's the best way. So if you give yourself a really thick even layer, it's the easiest way to get a consistent end result.
And how long do you need to leave the cake in the fridge to set it up before you crumb coat?
It's like firm to the touch, so you don't want it to be tacky. Essentially, you just want it to be slightly firmed up and crusted. I would say about 15 minutes, maybe half an hour, if you want it to be safe.
And with the cream in the butter icing, does that mean the cake needs to be kept in the fridge and the icing needs to be kept in the fridge?
It has to be served at room temperature, but if you're going to store it for a long time, keep it in the fridge and then bring it out to room temperature.
Fab.
Okay, so there is a certain amount of time pressure on using both of these icings, especially as we get further into winter, because they will start to set and crust. So you kind of want to work quickly when you've got your icing on the cake. Anyone who's tried this before will notice it gets a little bit harder as time goes on. So with your palette knife, same technique, smoothing out from the top first, backwards and forwards so that it overhangs the edge. We just want to get this roughly flat, but don't worry because we're going to come back to it later on. Again, if you want to use this technique, this is really handy just to give yourself a nice, definitely straight top. And then, so you'll be working over here with your elbow in the air. I'm just going to show you over here. Working from top to bottom, side to side, just to even out your icing. And essentially, you want it as even as possible, and you just want to make sure it's coated the cake completely. Doesn't matter if it goes onto the cake board, and you want it to slightly overhang the top. So just working it all the way around. Okay, that's it. And now with your cake scraper, just always clean. Same technique, but slightly, annoyingly, this is going to be a slightly, just slightly different set of rules. Because this icing is really, really soft, And your final coat is all about getting very smooth, bubble-free, shiny finish. The way that you skim off the top surface of the icing, it just needs to be really, really gentle. So as I said before, just holding this really firmly, but the pressure you put onto the cake is quite gentle. So we always do it once around just to kind of try and see what we've got. So with the palette knife in place, smoothing off that top layer with your elbow and wrist locked, and turn the turntable into it. And this just kind of shows us what we've got. So as you can see, there's loads of holes and gaps. And the next thing that you need to do is fill those in. So just go all around the cake with a little bit of icing on your palette knife. Fill in any holes. So this kind of shows you the lie of the land of where there were gaps when you put on the coat of icing in the first place. So again, that's even and smooth as you can, filling all those holes. Clean your cake scraper. And then another time, just once around to see what you've got. Holding this really firm and really straight, because if you let the icing where it's uneven push back against your palette knife, you'll end up with like a top hat or a sandcastle. So I'm going to go around one more time. And then I've got a couple more little holes. And you really have to do this step. So it's smoothing it off, filling in the gaps, smoothing it off until you've got a nice even coat. Keep this clean. And once again, I'm going to come around and show you the technique in a sec. So as you can see, this hand is always steady. So I'm really getting down so I can see what I'm doing. There will be fluctuations in the amount of icing, and you just want to see what you're doing and make sure that you're getting a straight edge.
Could your cake ever collapse if you had too much icing on it?
If it was very soft, yes. Sometimes our vanilla cakes are really soft. If they're very freshly baked and we put loads of icing on, then they might just not have the structure to support it. But I would say always just work onto a completely cooled cake and you'll be fine.
And one more question: Do you reuse your icing bags?
Yes, I do, and they're also biodegradable and recyclable. But we use them several times. Yeah, we use them throughout the day. So so now, as you can, I don't know if you can see, but I've got rid of all of those big air pockets. And then the next step in the process is just smoothing that top layer so it's absolutely perfect. And this is just really about knocking out those tiny little air bubbles. And if anyone's ever used this icing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And my top tip for this stage, besides loads of practice, by the way, it is just annoying like that, is to try and practice. You can practice this without any cake at all. Turning your turntable at a 360 motion. So you basically want to be able to do a complete rotation of the cake stand in one movement. Because of the length of my arms, I normally start as far as I can around here. And as you can see, I'm sort of gripping it at this point. As you turn it, your hand, rather than being up here, your hand turns underneath, your hand goes underneath. So it's not going to obstruct what you're doing in the front. So start from here, underneath, and you want to end up, I almost have it at the end of my finger, at the end. You just want to practice this a few times, getting a perfect 360 rotation. And it's not spinning it, it's not going too fast, but just a really slow, controlled movement. And that's going to give you a smooth, even finish. So if anyone's worked with Swiss meringue buttercream, if you're watching this back and you're trying to do it, you often end up with vertical lines. That will be from where you're stopping and starting with your cake scraper on the icing. You really want to try and master doing it in one motion. If you have horizontal lines, it's because your cake scraper isn't clean. So just always make sure that's clean. That's what that's from. So I'm going to show you a 360. Your cake scraper in position, not like this, not flat against it, just at a nice 45-degree angle. Place it against the icing, looking at what you're doing, And then in one steady motion, turn it all the way around. And the final tip I want to give you is about the dismount. So if you were to, even after you finish your 360 motion, stop what you're doing on the cake, you're going to end up with a line. So you just want to practice the way that you come away gently. So if you watch what I do at the end, scraper against the icing, 360 degrees, and at the end just pull it away. I know it's annoying to watch somebody who's done it over times, but I'm trying. Unfortunately, it does just take practice, but I'm trying to break it down and sort of preempt things that might go wrong. So if you watch this back, hopefully there's helpful tips in here. So that's looking pretty good. Another tip I'll give you is that there's always a time when you just know it's time to stop. If you keep going back and back and back, you're going to make it worse. So sometimes you just have to call it, make sure you're happy. But I'm pretty happy with that. There's no bubbles in there. And then we're going back to the top, and this is the exact same technique we did before. So unfortunately, with patience from the front, just gently pushing it back into the middle, take away a little bit of icing as you go, and then rotate the cake stand back, take a little bit more. I'll do it here so you can see me. That. Anyone got any questions while I do this? Practice, that's right. Unfortunately, I've never seen anyone be able to do it straight off the bat, but I've seen people pick it up quickly. And I think because honestly, I have no God-given talent whatsoever. This took me ages and ages and ages to learn. I'm hopefully able to break it down and give you some points which might actually be useful by sort of preempting the things that I know can go wrong. But definitely top tip is the consistency of your icing. Get that right and you eliminate half of your problems straight off the bat.
And also, if you're tempted to do what I'm doing, which is to put on your second coat before you put it in the fridge, it's not great because you get bits falling off, just so you know.
To be honest, it looks great from here.
I'm quite pleased with it.
What kind of icing did you use? How are we doing for time? Oh no, we've run out of time. Does anyone want to?
To the end of our time. What icing I use? Just your buttercream. So it's all your American buttercream.
So, should I show you what's the best technique to show you? I can show you a glitter cherry, a caramel drip, or just a quick introduction to piping.
Okay, let's see what people say down here. Has anyone got any thoughts down here? We've only got a few more minutes left.
Sorry, really hope that was helpful.
Anyone want to vote for something? Piping. Everyone wants piping.
Piping.
Oh,
Drip. It's pretty neck and neck.
Oh, one drip. Okay. Oh, a couple of drips. Oh, yes. So I think we're still. Oh no! Hang on, the drips have come in.
I'm gonna try and show you both.
Yeah, I think
I'll show you both, and you can leave if you're bored. Okay, so we're going to do caramel drip first. Just bear in mind, again, consistency is really key with this. You want it just, I use a squeezy bottle, by the way. You can use different techniques, but this is the best way. I would normally take it from the fridge, just give it a quick blast in the microwave. It's really, really hot in here today, so this is very runny. But normally my top tip would be just to get the consistency just right. So you want it soft enough that it's going to set on your cake and it's going to drip down the side. But not so runny that it's going to just kind of slip off, which may happen today. So here we go. Again, I would want you to do this over here. And again, you're working to the same spot and then turning the turntable. Same spot, turning the turntable. And the technique is really simple and it's this. So you want to ensure that you're piping onto the top horizontal surface of the cake. Avoid the temptation to pipe onto the side, which I know is what it looks like. You should be starting on the top of your cake. And then piping from here, and you just very gently nudge it over the edge, and then quickly come back to the top, and you're piping across the top of the cake. And then nudge it and come back, and across. And then nudge it and come back, and turning the turntable as you go. So you're only nudging it over the side of the cake for just a split second, and it will do its thing and drip down slowly, or perhaps really quickly in this case, because it is absolutely boiling in here. And then I normally, at the end, when I'm happy, I'm just going to do half so we can do some piping, come back to the top and then just do another line, just to make sure that's nice and pretty. And that is it. Ta-da! Okay, you would normally chill it, yeah. I would recommend chilling it, but we're freestyling today. Okay, so really, really quickly, intro to piping, which I feel like is a longer session. Piping bag, and I'm using a shell tip, fat shell, which is really nice, handy, versatile. This is Wilton's 6B, any old shell will do. And pop the tip into the end of the bag. A bit more easier to see. And then Swiss meringue buttercream. I make the caramel and the recipe is on my website. You probably can buy it. I don't know if you have exactly the right consistency. You want it so it's quite runny. So using your piping bag exactly the same as we did before. And squeeze down to the end so all the pressure's there. And I'm going to show you first on my cake scraper. And I would recommend practicing on a cake scraper or some baking paper before you go onto a cake, and then you can just scrape it off, pop it back into your bowl, and practice. Unfortunately, it's one of those things. So just as we did before, really good twist at the end. Make sure all your icing is only going to come out one side. Errant tip. Squeeze, seal between some thumb and forefinger, and then just squeeze gently. So I'm going to show you how to do a shell. So the technique here is basically at this sort of angle and not quite touching the cake, or in this instance, the scraper. So you're just hovering half a centimetre away from the surface and pipe. And then just for a beat, pipe into the place where you were and lift it ever so slightly and then stop piping and pull away. So if you imagine the things that you're doing, and then when you go back to the next one, pipe sort of against the first one. So what I see people often doing when they're piping a shell is trying to follow the wave motion that you can see, lifting it up too high, making this big gap, and then pulling it out like that. So you really need to make sure that you stop squeezing when you pull away. So if you think of it as squeeze, squeeze, pull, and you're just lifting ever so slightly, just raising it ever so slightly and pulling back down. So from here, pipe into your shell, squeeze it for a beat, and then pull. So squeeze, squeeze, pull, squeeze, squeeze, pull. And as you pull away, that's going to just give you that perfect shell shape. So that is your speed piping class, and I'm just going to show you that on the cake. So from the side, squeeze, squeeze, pull, and if you can see the amount that I'm moving my piping bags, actually only just a tiny little bit. You see that? Yeah. So just that tiny little bit lift. Maybe it's easier to see from here. So squeeze, squeeze, pull, squeeze, squeeze, pull. And stop squeezing as you pull. Always pipe, so it's overlapping the shell before. Practice like crazy. You're going to smash it. And that is probably all we have time for. It's not finished, but hopefully lots of tips and tricks in there that you can use for lots of different cake decorations. You can obviously use these tips and ideas to decorate a cake in whatever style you like.
Lily, that's been completely amazing. And actually, given that I've never done that before and I was trying to...
that looks fabulous.
You know, I'm pretty chuffed with that.
I
keep practicing.
I'm happy I was able to help.
and it was absolutely amazing. And thank you to all the audience for coming, and thank you for being such an amazing audience and asking really brilliant questions. And thanks again, Lily, you're a star.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to see you. Thank you everybody for coming. Hope that was helpful. Have a good evening.